welcome back to another episode of Behind the Wheelhouse. You're on the show with J and J. I'm John. This is Justin. We got a great guest on today, Reed Loustalot. Did I say that right? I said it right.
I think you got it, John. I think you.
I got it. All right. Reed has been tackling some of the biggest pain points in the trucking world, and that has to do mainly with parking. Reed, we appreciate you coming on. Tell us about Truck Parking Club.
Essentially, what Truck Parking Club is we're a two-sided marketplace where we help truckers and fleets find and reserve parking, and we help property owners and businesses monetize vacant space on their properties. So, example, if you're a trucking company and you have a yard and you only fill up half of it and you want to make some money, you can put it on our site. And drivers and fleets who use our app and website can reserve parking at your yard, and you can offer hourly, daily, weekly, or monthly, or all the above. And yeah, you go live, and next thing you know, drivers are parking on your lot, and you're getting paid. So we've got about 3,750 locations at this point. It's about 62,000-ish spaces across all of them in 49 states. We're only missing Hawaii. Once we get it, I am for sure going on a trip there. But we added Alaska a few months ago, and so we're in all 49 states, and typically about 70 to 80 to 90 new locations per week at this point. Wow. And our goal this year is to get to 10,000 locations by the end of 2026. So we've got our work cut out for us.
Yeah. Well, parking is a big issue. I know, I used to own a trucking company, and, we'd hear from our drivers all the time where they couldn't find a places to park. They end up parking on the side of the road, unsafe. Yep. And then from my standpoint, I had a yard that sat empty half the year. So before we get into the questions, I really want to, give you a good introduction, or what I think is a good introduction. I looked at your LinkedIn page. You seem like a pretty hip dude especially when it comes to, people in the trucking industry. I wouldn't consider a lot of us hip, a lot of us in tune with, marketing and making the industry cool, so to speak. So Reed is a transportation industry lifer with a philosophy degree from Marquette. Philosophy degree, right? Is that real? Philosophy degree.
It is.
My dad has a philosophy and political science degree, and he's an interesting fellow, so to speak. So, and a knack for keeping things light, sarcastic, and honest. After starting your career in carrier sales because you liked maps, Reed took a few unexpected turns, including layoffs, side hustles, selling hats. Is that right? I like your hat. Now, please advise. That's a common theme for me.
Yeah.
Selling hats and making memes before landing exactly where you belong. Today, Reed serves as Chief Marketing Officer at Truck Parking Club, where he helps build the largest network of reservable truck parking in the U.S. You're a husband and a dad of two. Reed brings humor, sharp insight, and a refreshing take on marketing, trucking, and why what you say and how you say it actually matters. Did I get that right?
That was pretty good, John. I think you might be the first person who's ever read my LinkedIn bio. I actually wrote that a couple months ago, maybe like a month or two ago. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, you know what? I actually should probably write something here, because I used to have nothing in there. And then I thought about it. I was like, I'm just going to write what I've kind of who I am. And
I found it really interesting. A lot of people don't put a lot of thought what they put into their LinkedIn bio. They just kind of, put a little 2-sentence blurb, and you made an impact from the beginning. So I was impressed right off the bat. I said, this is going to be a good interview. So
it's good to be here, man. I have had an interesting, I guess, 10-year career now in transportation, and it's been a lot of fun. So I'm to your point, I do feel like I've landed in the right spot where my skills can be properly leveraged towards accomplishing a super important goal for the industry.
Well, awesome. Yeah. We're talking about that 10 years experience. Tell us a little bit how you got into trucking, and with your background, got to where you are, because I will tell you how I found out about you guys was your advertising. Your advertising of how you're standing out at a yard that's barren and y'all got your big yellow signs, screaming, hey, this is how you can make a few dollars, because like I said before we got started, it's a full circle kind of business. It helps the drivers, it helps the landowners, and it helps the cities clean up properties that can be, nice and profitable for everybody. So tell us a little bit about that background.
So I graduated college in 2016. I had a philosophy degree. I just moved to Boston because my now wife was living there. And so I followed her out there. And I needed a job, like many people, right after graduating college. And I had a buddy who was a year older than me at school, and he had spent the last year working at a freight brokerage, Echo Global Logistics, so decent size freight brokerage. And he was like, you should apply here. And he sent me the job description. And I remember reading it, and it said, you will like this job. The first thing you said is if you like money. And I was like, okay, I kind of like money. But then the next thing was like, if you like looking at maps all the time. And I was like, I love maps. So I'm down. Right. That was kind of what got me.
Yeah.
And I, of course, interviewed. And then I was a carrier sales rep. And that essentially meant that I was responsible for finding trucks for Echo's truckload division. So I started, I guess it would have been in June of 2016, looking at a big list of refrigerated shipments and trying to find carriers to haul them. And I ended up doing essentially that for 5 years at Echo. So, over those 5 years, I basically was responsible for booking the freight, tracking the freight, building relationships with carriers, building relationships with drivers. And I ended up working with, probably in tens of thousands, at least, drivers over those years. I've booked, tens of thousands of loads. So that meant I talked to tens of thousands of drivers and thousands of trucking companies. And I ended up, forming pretty solid relationships, many that continued to this day, even though I've not done it for, 6 years now or 5 years now. But yeah, owner ops, all the way up to like mega fleets. Right. I was working with kind of a whole smattering of them. So yeah, I really kind of got introduced to the industry through that job, which is an interesting way to enter an industry. I wouldn't change anything about it because it's a great job for a kid out of college. Learned a lot about the industry and kind of fell in love with it. Like I said, I'm still friends with a lot of drivers that used to haul freight for me back in the day. So that's really where I kind of learned about the industry, because I feel like folks who aren't from the industry or have no experience with it or aren't related to somebody who's in it, really it's easy to forget about. Despite trucking and transportation in general being, something like 10% of US GDP, it's like nobody ever thinks about it unless it's broken. And unless you can't go to Costco and buy 60 million rolls of toilet paper, right? Then you might think the supply chain, but
Yeah.
short of that, you're probably not thinking about it very much. And so,
Well, except for today, right? We're getting a lot of news about, independent driver verification and drivers not being, compliant and, being illegal. So the trucking world is kind of like coming again to the forefront.
it's unfortunate that it takes like negative activity to bring it to the forefront.
100%.
But I'm sensing a theme here. Can't buy toilet paper at Costco during COVID. Like, we got to talk about the supply chain. Like, a bunch of drivers driving who shouldn't be driving, who arrived via questionable means and obtained their CDLs in questionable ways is, we got to talk about that. So there's more eyeballs on the industry now. So it's like, you can argue whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. It kind of is what it is, and it's good to talk about it, obviously. And obviously the problems need to be solved. So that's kind of my background. So I got into the industry, got a job out of college, and ended up kind of bouncing around. I ended up working at Trimble, the huge software conglomerate. They own a bunch of TMSs and PC Miler and a few other products that ELDs and telematics and stuff like that. So they're a big company. I was there for about a year, and then I got laid off. And then I spent basically 2 years selling hats. I ended up making a little software tool for small trucking companies. I essentially screwed around for 2 years and had some fun, figured out how to piece together a living for myself, and ended up meeting Evan, who's the founder, CEO of Truck Parking Club. I met him at a conference, and I guess it would have been June of 2023. And we just kind of became friends. He had started the business, I think, 4 or 5 months prior to that. actually more like six months prior to that. So they were really kind of just getting going. And we spent some time together and kind of became friends and stayed in touch. And I ended up working with Truck Parking Club on the side, kind of helping on the social media side of things early on. I guess that would have been August of 23. And then I kind of got a peek behind the curtain. I didn't realize even in my experience as a broker, I did not realize how big the truck parking problem was and how meaningful an impact it makes on, the life of drivers and just the productivity of drivers and the productivity of fleets. I didn't know that. The only thing I really knew is that every time I did a load with a driver, like probably half the time they would ask me, can I park at the shipper? Can I park at the receiver? And 99% of the time the answer was no.
No.
And if I could even get an answer, because anyone who's tried to call warehouses knows it's not always easy to get somebody on the phone. So that was my real only experience with truck parking. But once I started to do some research, I was like, shoot, like this is a big issue, and there hasn't. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of progress made on it in the last decade that people have been talking about it. Like there's been plenty of bills in Congress, and there's been kind of local and state efforts that have added some capacity. But at the end of the day, and I can get into this if we want to. We at Truck Parking Club, we wanted to try to quantify how many spaces are needed or what the shortage is, if you will.
Yeah,
and
get
so
into that a little bit.
Yeah, we there's been stats thrown around by various organizations. You kind of see that one space for every 11 trucks. That's a common stat. But we basically wanted to kind of look at it from first principles and be like, okay, how many trucks are out there that need a space to park on a daily basis? Meaning they're not, sitting on a yard somewhere for months on end. How many trucks are over the road, need a place to park on a daily basis? We arrived at about 2.4 million trucks.
Wow.
And then we also wanted, so that's kind of the demand, if you will, for truck parking. And then we wanted to look at, what is the market supply, and how many rest areas are there? How many truck stops are there? And that number ended up being about 700,000 spaces supplied by those organizations, and that's everything. And that's mostly free parking at truck stops and rest areas, obviously. And if you compare those two numbers, you're like, holy cow, like 1.7 million spaces need to exist that don't exist. Where are all those drivers parking? And we see that every single day. If you drive down the highway, you see trucks on the ramps, you see trucks, there's no shortage of stories in local news of being like trucks are parking, in neighborhoods, they're parking in every nook and cranny in our town.
They're parking in Walmart and getting towed, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's
parking in the back of a strip mall and getting towed. That's even worse for a driver.
Right. And so at the end of the day, I was like, right problem, right team. I really liked the team that Evan had put together back in those early days. And I thought it was a good brand to leverage my kind of social skills. And honestly, I also thought, I would learn a lot because I'd be doing a lot of things that I had no experience doing. And so it was a great opportunity. So I took it. And obviously we've been on a long journey ever since. It feels like it's been a lot longer than 2.5 years or whatever it's been since I first kind of met Evan. But we've grown a lot over the years. I think when I came on board part-time at first, we had like less than 100 locations. And we ended up by the end of, I joined full time in May of 24. And I think we had about 400 or 500 locations at that point. We ended up finishing 2024 at about 11 or like just under 1,100. And then last year we added about 25 to 2,600 in 2025. And we're at 3,750 now. We're trying to get to 10,000. And really, why we harp on this number of locations and number of spaces is drivers, when we ask our customers, we call them trucker members, when we ask them via surveys and just talking to them, like, what do you care about? What do you want us to do? Like, what more do you want from us? They're like, we just want more places to park. We just want more locations, and we need them everywhere. When we ask them, like, what specific areas should we focus on? It's kind of overwhelming how many of them just say, do it everywhere. Do it everywhere. Because drivers especially were thinking, okay, like if I can't find a spot at the truck stop or the rest area is full, then I'll fire up Truck Parking Club and book a spot. But what we realized in the last year in talking to our trucker members is that the ones who are really getting their money's worth in their head and viewing us as like a point of leverage, as a tool of leverage, or thinking about us as, oh, okay, like how do I use Truck Parking Club and reservable parking to drive further than I otherwise would have, or to get more out of my logbook each day?
Yeah, most drivers are being forced to stop, especially if they're trying to get a free spot at a truck stop, at a rest area. They're having to stop around 3, 4 o'clock, cut their day short, and then they're losing out on miles. They're showing up late to deliveries. They're stressed out. So with you and you being able to show your spots on a map that's easily accessible online, drivers can kind of plan their day accordingly, correct?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll give you an example. I spoke with a driver last week who he's a company driver. His company does not reimburse him when he pays for parking. He has literally booked like 35 spots with us in the last 4 months, just him. And I called him and I was like, kind of, what's going on here? At first, I asked him, are you a company driver? Are you an owner op? Like, what's your story? He's like, I'm a company driver. My company doesn't reimburse me, but it's worth it for me every single time if it means I can get closer to where I need to be to start my next day. If that means I'm over the road and I have to drive across the country and I want to get 600 miles in, or I want to get my 11 hours in, and I can find a spot at that 11-hour mark and I'm good and I've got my whole time. He even said, like, if it's after 5 p.m. on any given day, he won't even try to go to the truck stop. Like if it's 2 p.m. and he's like, okay, I still got 3 hours to go or 4 hours to go, I'm just going to fire up the app and book a spot as far as I can go, because I know I'm not going to waste my time going into the truck stop or going to 2 or 3 or 4 of them and circling. Like he recognized, and he said this, point blank. He's like, time is money for me and miles are money for me. And the more miles I can get in each day, the more money I make, but also the better my life is. He's like, if I can park 2 miles from a receiver the night before and be the first driver there in the morning and get unloaded first, that sets my whole day up. Versus if I had parked 40 miles away at the closest truck stop, which was a free spot, but then fought traffic, and maybe I was the 5th driver there and I got out 3 hours or 4 hours later than I otherwise would have. Like that, the cascading effects of that decision are huge, right? It might be the difference between making the next load and missing the next load. It might be the difference between being the driver picked who's empty first, picked for the next pickup, versus not being empty in time to pick up the good load. So he's like, it's a stress reliever for me. It's a quality of life improvement. It's a productivity improvement for me. I make more money. My life is just all around better using this. And it's more than just drivers too. Fleets have really in the last year started to pay more attention to us, and they're starting to think about us as a way to position equipment, as a way to position trailers, drop and hook, relay yards, that sort of thing. Because a lot of fleets, most of them don't have yards, and if they do, it might just be one, in their hometown where they park their trucks when the drivers are home. But there's reasons why they might want more yards, right? If they have a customer who's got a facility 6 states away from their yard, and the customer's like, hey, can you drop trailers here? We don't have any room at our warehouse. Do you have a yard nearby where we could store these trailers? They're saying no, because most fleets aren't going to go out and sign a year lease on a piece of property and go through the whole song and dance to secure a yard. And so what
I wish I had you. I wish I had you a few years ago.
Yeah, and so it's a tool to be leveraged by fleets as well. We have fleets all the time who are like, booking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trailer spaces on their own on our site and building kind of like their own on-demand yard, and they're able to service customers that they otherwise weren't able to. I talked to a guy who owns 2 trucks a couple weeks ago, and he was looking for drivers to hire to be in his trucks. And he was having a hard time because where the trucks were parked was like oftentimes 60, 70, 80 miles away from where the drivers were living. And that just added a whole new element of like difficulty in finding a driver who was like willing to commute, 2 to 3 hours to go get to the truck. And he was able to book a spot with us like 5 minutes from a driver he hired. And that was like the difference between retaining and losing the driver. It was just simple stuff like that is easy to forget about, is just huge utility for the right person. And these are all use cases we're discovering, right? We didn't think about any of this Like we didn't really talk too much about, oh, here's all the different ways you can use us in the beginning. We kind of learned over time just by watching and talking to trucker members and be like, hey, how are you using us? And so we've learned a lot about the safety angle. We've learned a lot about the efficiency and kind of the asset utilization angle. We've learned a lot about, from the driver specific persona angle, like what does this mean to them? And all around super impactful once people start to really wrap their head around how to leverage us and how to use us to get ahead, as opposed to, oh shoot, I can't find a place to park tonight. I'm out $20 because I'm paying Truck Parking Club to park, right? Like that's not the right way to think about this. So yeah, I mean, it's been an eye-opening, past 18 months, I would say, on that whole side of things.
One thing that you said, I want to go back to just a little bit. As I've said before on this show, me and John are both driver first mentalities. We always think the drivers, owner operators, there's nobody out there for them advocating for them. And you said that you had actually called a driver that had parked with y'all a lot. Could you go into that a little bit of why you make those phone calls, why you keep up with that? Because not only are they paying for a service, but then going that extra mile and you noticing what they do. To me, that's a big thing for drivers. Drivers never get checked on or, hey, this is what's going on. Why are you doing it? How can we help? How can we be a service? Especially, you go park at the truck stops, like I said, you'll waste time all day. A lot of these drivers aren't the best guys to back up, guys and gals. They can't back up good, so it's very tight. Yeah, you can park there and get a sandwich and things. But if you, as you say, if you time your thing out and you can gain, because I hear it all the time. I used to be a dispatcher and a recruiter, and drivers would go, well, I got a ticket because I thought I could make it to the next Loves, and this Loves, I shouldn't have went on fire because now my clock's out and legally I'm not supposed to go, but I tried to push it. It makes me feel like you would talk to these guys and go, okay, where do you run? Here's some other options for you to make those drives better for you. So can you talk a little bit more on that? Because like I said, we're big trying to help drivers any way we can.
We've spent the vast majority of the company's history really solely focused on marketing and talking to drivers first. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. A good kind of explanation is, if we had 20 locations and we walked into JB Hunt and knocked on their door and we're like, hey, JB Hunt, can you guys tell your drivers about parking at our 20 locations? They would have been like, who the heck are you? You're not an established player. We have no interest in talking to you. Get out of our office. So we've very much taken a bottoms up approach in talking to and marketing to drivers specifically. And our customer service is entirely made up of former drivers. Entirely.
Oh, wow.
We've got 15 or 16 folks on our customer service team who are all former drivers, every single one of them. And the first hire at the company actually is a woman named Tracy Allen who runs that team, and she's a 33-year CDL holder. She's actually just on the other side of the wall from me. She works down here at our headquarters with me. But she was like the 15th person driver to ever book a space on Truck Parking Club. And Evan called her after she did the booking to ask her how it was going or how it went. And they ended up just kind of hitting it off. Evan hired her. And so she was our first employee. And so really kind of the driver mentality is basically at the core of the company, because literally half the company is drivers. And so it's basically in our DNA. And it's just kind of, when you're building a product, it seems obvious that you should be like talking to your customers and learning what they like, what they don't like, all these things. It's easier said than done to do that though, right? But we, having the customer service team we do and actually answering the calls and helping drivers out when they have questions or issues or concerns or they're just curious. I mean, that's basically what we've been doing since day one. We've had this team that's really been there to talk to the driver.
They understand what they've gone through because they've done it as well.
Yeah, so yeah, and it's it's the same. It's actually the same thing on our property. So on our property onboarding team, the folks who are vetting the properties and bringing them live essentially onto the site, they're all drivers too. And so they can look at a location and be like, okay, like I parked a 70-foot long vehicle before, like this lot will work or this lot won't. And so really like being first and foremost thinking about the driver's perspective appears in every aspect of the company. So and that's that's done a lot for us, and it's even bleeds into our marketing. Like the most majority of our marketing is aimed at just like driver interest stuff, right? Like we've got 4 vans out on the road, guys going around putting up signs, going to truck shows, going to conferences, and they capture a lot of good content on the road. It can be a cool truck, it could be some crazy thing on a flatbed. We're like, what the heck is this? To we're at a truck show and we're interviewing drivers talking about their rigs at the truck show, to we're meeting random drivers at our locations talking to them, to we're showing videos of our locations. I mean, most of our content is kind of aimed at the driver as well.
Talk a little bit about, your costs, and, you mentioned carriers don't often chip in for the drivers. How do you deal with that? Are you approaching carriers that your drivers work for, and seeing if there's any way to like partner or help these guys out? Because truck parking cost is, it's not cheap. And these drivers have a hard time affording so much, and it's the last thing that they really want to worry about. So how do you deal with carriers who aren't willing to help chip in?
It'd actually be interesting for us to actually try to piece together which ones do and which ones don't. Just the big companies. But I mean, there's a lot of reasons why fleets don't cover the cost of parking for drivers. There's accounting reasons. There's paperwork reasons. Like if every time a driver was paying for parking, they were using a different system. Some of them had a receipt, some of them had a physical receipt, some of them had an email receipt. That adds complexity and kind of overhead to the back office of a fleet that many don't want to engage in. If they have no visibility into where the driver's actually parking, what does the facility look like? Is it secure? Where is it? Is it actually efficient for them to park there? There's like so just to summarize that, there's like very little visibility that the fleet would have into what is actually going on the ground. And if you kind of add up these reasons, it's just, I feel like a lot of fleets just kind of throw their hands up and they're just like, well, the drivers figure out parking. Like we hear that all the time. Like it's not something that's really been on the minds of the fleets. The safety folks might be thinking, oh shoot, like we can't have drivers parking on the ramps, right? If we get hit, it's our fault and we could be in $100 million lawsuit.
How big of a problem is that, from the safety and compliance side when it comes to parking?
I mean, it's huge. I mean, Justin talked about getting towed and you talked about getting towed, John. Like, park in the wrong spot, get a tow bill, that could be 10 grand, like just like that. Right? Whether you're parking on a ramp or where you're parking, in a strip mall, you're not supposed to, or anything like that. But beyond that, it's like, we've all heard of the nuclear verdicts. More often than not, has to do with like accidents occurring while they're driving. But like, if you're illegally parked and you get hit, it's a question of whether or not that's going to be your fault at the end of the day, and you're going to be liable. And some billboard attorney takes a case of a family that ran into a truck that was parked on the highway that they couldn't see. I mean, they're going to be seeing dollar signs probably. Right. And that's a huge issue for fleets. And so fleets are trying to avoid that at all costs. But now we're at a point where, 92 of the top 100 fleets have booked with us. And oftentimes it's hundreds of times, and that's hundreds of individual drivers at, a Swift or a JB Hunt or, insert large fleet here that have found us and booked with us on their own without ever talking to us, without the fleet ever talking to us, et cetera. And so we're at a point now where we can walk into a big fleet and we can say, hey, 700 of your drivers have booked with us, 2,500 times in total. Clearly there's demand for what we're providing. And all the reasons why you weren't paying for parking before, the receipt system, the tracking system, the visibility about the property system, like all of these reasons, we're able to go point by point and show how we solve all of those. First of all, we can stand up what we call an organization. We can make a fleet account, and the fleet can onboard all their drivers, and any bookings the drivers make all appear right there. All the costs are there. All the receipts are there. All of the property photos are there. All the descriptions are there. They know exactly where they're parking. They know how much they're using it. And oftentimes there's a question of payment. Like if the driver most drivers don't have a company card, right?
Right.
Except for fuel, obviously. And so we're able to set up an organization where they can either share a payment method or deposit funds into the individual driver's account wallet. We've really knocked down all of the reasons why a fleet wouldn't do it. And now we're in the process of going to all the fleets and essentially, educating them often, like, because again, a lot of them have this attitude of parking is the driver's decision and we have nothing to do with it. Before we existed, that made sense. There was really nothing else they could do, right? If I was a dispatcher and I wanted to help a driver find parking before Truck Parking Club, what would I have done?
I used to go and say, hey, ask the shipper if you can park there. Or
Yeah.
ask the receiver if you can
There's
park
not much
there.
you can do.
That was
And
it.
that's kind of the default assumption that a lot of folks have. And we're having to go around and say, no, that's no longer the case. You can use us. You can make an organization. You can onboard all your drivers. You can give them a shared payment method or put money in their wallet. They can do the booking. Your dispatchers can do the booking. You know exactly what you're getting, and all the payments and the usage details are all available for your team 24/7. And here's all the different reasons why you should be using us. You should be using us because we can help you improve your asset utilization. We can help your drivers get the most out of their clock, which, if you're a big fleet, and to your point, John, if half the drivers at a big fleet on any given day are stopping 2 hours early, you multiply that across a year, that's a huge loss for the fleet.
Most definitely.
Right? It's a huge loss for the drivers individually. And ultimately, if you even go further and you aggregate that across the entire industry, it's a huge drag on the efficiency of the whole industry in America. And that has trickled down effects to the end consumer, right? So it's huge. It's a huge thing that a lot of folks have not really thought a lot about, just because there's been this default assumption that there's nothing they can do about it. And now we're at a point where there is something you can do about it. And ultimately, that's why in the next couple of years, we want to have hundreds of thousands of locations. We want to have a location within 10 minutes of any driver in the US. And when you have that, like I said, there's 1.7 million space shortage. We're not stopping when we hit 1.7 million spaces, right? Like ultimately the goal is like parking your truck should be as easy as parking your car. When you get in your car in the morning, you go somewhere, you don't think about where you're going to have to park.
Let's pivot a little bit to that. Let's talk about that for a minute. From the property owner's perspective, what are some of the biggest concerns you hear about allowing truck parking on their land? Things like, you want to put their fears to rest, things like liability, security, wear and tear, community pushback, and how does, Truck Parking Club help mitigate those risks while still making it worthwhile, for a revenue opportunity?
I guess to start, the basic requirements that a property has to join Truck Parking Club are, can a truck get in and out of the location safely without hitting anything? Right? Obviously, there's height concerns. There's just parking. You need a certain amount of space to be able to park a truck. Can a truck get in and out? Can the ground support the weight? Right? These are 80,000 pound vehicles. If you're parking in a dirt field and it rains, you're going to sink and everyone's going to have a bad time. So it's, gravel or cement or pavement, that can support the weight. And I would say the vast majority of properties that are joining us are folks who are often already parking heavy machinery. It could be their own trucks. Like we have hundreds of trucking companies that are property members with us. That's what we call them, property members. But beyond that, it's trucking companies, it's warehouses, it's CDL schools, it's repair shops. There's a lot of real estate investors who've gotten into truck parking. But then when you start to get into the, self-storage has been a huge thing for us, a huge segment. When you get into those sort of like further away from the supply chain locations, they oftentimes are the ones who have more questions about, liability or protection or safety or just anything like that. On the liability and kind of damage protection side of things, we've got a $25,000 policy that covers every location. So Truck Parking Club, if we cannot collect the cost of the damage from the fleet's insurance. More often than not, we can. But if we can't, then Truck Parking Club will cover up to 25K in damage to a property. And that's something we provide to all property members. Obviously, conditions apply, asterisk. But the other thing that's been super interesting is the whole question of zoning and land use and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. We don't encounter issues a lot, and we don't have very specific guidelines on zoning requirements because every municipality is a bit different on the zoning side of things. So in some municipalities, a commercially zoned property might work for truck parking, and others you might need to be industrial. So we don't have strict guidelines on that. We kind of just tell the property that they need to figure that out themselves. And we thankfully thus far haven't had many issues with that, but we do see it, right? And it is actually a serious barrier for the creation of more truck parking, because if you actually just think about, going back to just the numbers of the issue, right? And you look at the 1.7 million space shortage, and you say, okay, like we think this shortage is costing the industry this much, it's costing drivers this much. It's a huge drain on everything, like I already said. Okay, great. What do we do about it? How do we build more capacity or bring new capacity online? Traditionally, it's always been thought, oh, we need to build more. Right? The government needs to pass bills to allocate hundreds of millions of dollars, or states need to put up 50, 60, 70 million dollars. And at the end of the day, what we're seeing in these projects, if they get completed, is the cost per space is between $100,000 and $200,000. And it takes years and years and years and years to get these projects to completion. And it's just kind of obvious that if you're honest, the solution to the problem can't be building 1.7 million new spaces, because that's going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars, or whatever the math
No,
is.
you're really like, I mean, this is why Uber's successful. This is why Airbnb is successful. It's using other people's assets to benefit, in this case, drivers.
Yeah, and that's really kind of what the whole business is based on. And to tie this back to what we were talking about, if it's too expensive to build, then what are you going to do? You're going to leverage existing space. And that's what we do. I can't go into too much detail, but over the next couple of months, and perhaps I can come back and talk more about it. We'll have more about that. I guess I'll give you a little teaser. So our headquarters, it's called our clubhouse, is here in Ringgold, Georgia, which is about 20 minutes south of Chattanooga.
Yeah,
And
well.
before we were here, it was a truck repair shop, and a towing company. And they've been parking trucks on this lot here for 25 years. And when we moved in, we put up some signs, and the code enforcement of the city of Ringgold saw our signs and was like, hey, what's going on here? And so now we're having to go in front of the city of Ringgold and get a variance on our zoning to continue parking trucks here. When we ask, why was this not worried about for the last 25 years? It's just like, it's like, it's just one of those things. And I don't even say this to like throw shade at the city of Ringgold, because they've actually been very cooperative with us. So I have nothing but good things to say about them, and we're going to do all the things we need to do. But that's just an example, right? Like if this same issue is going to be encountered by some percentage of our locations, then there's something going on here that's an impediment to solving this important kind of infrastructure problem.
So you was talking about the landowners and stuff. What's the process if a driver sees a property, or if there's somebody listening who's got a property? What's that process that they need to do from their end to try to get with you guys to get that set up so then they can be live on y'all's app?
Sure. So if you're a property owner, I'll start with them. If you go to addtruckparking.com, that'll take you to our property member page where you can start the process. If you're on truckparkingclub.com, you can click become a property member, which is just at the top. And that'll take you through our draft process, which is just, adding some photos, the amenities, the description of the location, that sort of stuff. If you're a driver who, and maybe your fleet has extra space, or somebody who does, we have a referral program. If you could just go to referrtpc.com, So we get lots of property referrals, and we pay people for property referrals if the location goes live. So if you're an existing owner, you can go to addtruckparking.com. If you're a referrer and you know somebody, you can go to refertpc.com, and that'll have everything you need.
All right, awesome. Well, before we close out, do us a favor, fast forward 3 to 5 years. What does success look like for a truck parking club, and how does that reshape how freight actually moves across this country?
If you fast forward, 5 years, I think we have hundreds of thousands of locations. I think by that point, we'll get close to accomplishing the goal of having a location within 10 minutes of a driver anywhere in the US. And ultimately, what that means is we're going to be parking millions and millions and millions of trucks a year. And ultimately, what that's going to mean for the driver out there is that they're going to have to worry about parking less. Hopefully, we'll get it to a point where they don't even have to think about it. It's not something that's like hanging over their head every single day. And hopefully that's going to mean a more productive driver, a driver who's less stressed, who's less likely to churn out of the industry or churn out of a job because maybe their fleet is providing them the benefit of access to this. So that's kind of on the driver side. On the fleet side, what it's going to mean is, limitless trailer storage opportunities for them to position their equipment better, to think about their network better. And ultimately, that's going to mean a higher asset utilization, which is what a lot of fleets, kind of a stat they all care about is, are my units being properly deployed in the most efficient manner to maximize revenue and efficiency?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of freight agents and carriers out there who are missing out on opportunities. I know I was one of them, missing out on opportunities just because we didn't know how to position equipment or where to position them.
Yeah.
We didn't have any space. For me, I'm in Tampa, Florida, and I've got an opportunity in Cincinnati, Ohio, and they need, 6 drop trailers that they're, just off their site. There's
Yep.
no place. I mean, how am I going to accomplish that?
Yep.
I've got to be local to figure that out. This provides a potential solution.
Ultimately, we're going out, we're vetting the properties, we're onboarding them, we're making sure everything's accurate, and we're kind of giving it to the drivers and the fleets in the form of our app and saying, hey, you guys use this. Here's what we've learned. Here's how people are using us. Here's ideas. But I think over the next 5 years, we'll learn all sorts of cool ways that folks are using us to just be better, right?
One quick question I did have for property owners who are like, I want to know who's parking their truck in my lot. I want to know that they've been vetted. What do you do for that?
Obviously, when you are a property member, you have access to all of the data that's of everyone who's parked at your locations. So when they do a booking, they're filling out all of their information. And you can access that at any point. So if you're doing a yard audit, you're looking out your window, you're like, who's parked here? Okay, I see the white Freightliner, I see the red Peterbilt, et cetera, with the names of the companies and all that. If somebody's parked there a day longer than they're supposed to, we've got a process to ensure you're made whole and all payments are received. So we guarantee payment in that sense. Of course, our customer service is here to help our property members as well. So if there are issues or questions or something doesn't look right, then we're here to help with anything like that. Luckily, it's few and far between we have issues. So yeah, I appreciate y'all having us on. I would love to come back at some point in the future and we can check in, because every 6 months it seems to be like a month is a year in this world. So a lot changes pretty quick. So I appreciate y'all having me on.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you taking the time today, Reed. One thing I wanted to say before we close, Ready app. It's a driver onboarding and verification platform built for today's trucking industry. Ready app helps carriers, agencies, brokers to know exactly who's hauling their freight, and we make onboard faster, clear, and more secure for drivers with a driver first mentality. Go check us out. It's ready-app.com.
Ready-app.com. That's right. Gray Cross, great organization, a nonprofit created to support trucking families during times of emergency, hardship, and transition. A lot of families dealing with sudden loss of people who have lost their lives on the road. Gray Cross exists to stand behind the families and stand behind American drivers. So go on to graycross.org and donate today.
We appreciate all the efforts y'all are doing. Like I said, again, appreciate you taking your time. We really enjoyed it. Definitely want to have you back on.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys.